Merry met, virtual traveller, and welcome to Stories from Lore, a podcast that invites you to rewild yourself through story by exploring nature, folklore, and the stories it inspires. My name is Dawn Nelson, and I'm an author, consultant, and professional storyteller. Episode 3 is of Earth and Stone. For this season, we are diving into the medieval bestiaries to discover the strange and familiar creatures that lie within its pages. For this episode, I'm going to look at the animals in the medieval bestiaries of England that the scribes who were writing the entries may not have had first-hand knowledge of because the animals were not native to Britain. As always, as my main reference, I'm using the MS Bodley 764 Bestiary, a 13th century manuscript translated by Richard Barber. So come with me as we travel to the deserts, plains and jungles of the landscape we find across the oceans. We have heard spoken by certain men a wondrous species of wild beast, illustrious to men in distant lands, guarding its territory, enjoying its homeland among the earthen caves. That wild beast is called the panther by name, so the children of humanity, wise fast men revealed in books about this solitary stepper. That one is friend to all, gracious to the multitudes, except to the dragon alone, by whom he in all seasons is enraged by every sort of evil that he can achieve. That is a wondrous beast, miraculously lovely, of every hue, so heroes say. The Old English poem, known as the Panther, is thought to be from the Physiologus, written in the late medieval Anglo-Saxon period, and the section you just heard was translated by Dr. Ophelia Erin Hostetter. At the beginning of the poem, there is a line that refers to Middle-earth, an expression we are familiar with thanks to the works of Tolkien. But Middle-earth in this context seems to refer to anywhere that is the other side of Europe. The Cotton World map, created by the Anglo-Saxons in 1025 to 1050, is orientated so that the east is at the top of the map. And some argue that this map has some similarities with the map that Tolkien drew for his works. The map is orientated east because this is where the sun rises, and so this meant the map could easily be navigated as long as you could see the sunrise. On this map, to the east, there is a drawing of a lion in what is China, and it says, "Hic abundunt leones." Here are many lions. So what did those who had never seen them before imagine these lions, tigers and panthers to be like? To look like, to be like, and how they behaved? Let's just take a moment to go back several thousands of years, to the Vogelherd caves in South Germany. There have been several finds of ivory animals that are thought to date from 30,000 to 40,000 BCE. A horse, a lion and a mammoth have been uncovered from the cave sediment by a team from the University of Tübingen. The mammoth is under 4 centimetres long and weighs less than 8 grams. The lion is a little bigger at almost 6 centimetres. The figures are from Aurignacian culture, which is associated with the early Europeans. They are clearly recognisable as a horse, a lion and a mammoth. So what happened in the 40,000 years in between these little cave sculptures and the monks in the scriptoriums describing lions as sleeping with their eyes open and giving birth to dead young? Well, word of mouth occurred and a healthy dose of the Christian faith, which is often what we find in the bestiaries. In the MS Bodley 764 Bestiary, it states that lions with curly manes are peaceful and those with long smooth hair are fierce. If you think about it, this may in fact be referring to male and female lions, but I'm not sure I'd like to test the theory either way. It goes on to say how they enjoy roaming mountaintops, cover their tracks with their tails, which is a neat trick if that's what they do. And as I previously mentioned, that females give birth to dead cubs. This does show a woeful ignorance of basic biology, but it goes on to say that on the 3rd day, the father blows in their faces and then the cubs come to life. This is interpreted as being similar to God resurrecting Christ, so perhaps this was actually a little story that they made up to show how regal and godly this creature was. The lion is certainly frequently connected to God, and we can see this even in more contemporary literature such as C.S. Lewis's Narnia series. The breathing of life into lungs is also reminiscent of the creation story where Odin breathes life into the lungs of Ash and Emla, the first man and woman. So they're fairly standard creation myth themes. and perhaps this is what worked its way into the description of the lion. If you ever find yourself cornered by this godly creature, though, it is said to fear a white cockerel. Although, A, I'm not sure I'd try and carry a cockerel around in my pocket. They're not the most obedient of animals. And B, well, it's a lion. I would suggest backing away slowly and not faffing about with a cockerel. Anyway, it's up to you. The next entry tells of the tiger, who is said to be swift in flight. And if you steal her cubs, well, she will pursue you to the ends of the earth. The only way to escape her is to repeatedly throw down a glass ball in which she will see her own reflection. She'll think this reflection is her cub and spend many hours trying to pick it up. The brightly coloured panther is next and is described as tame. Again, I wouldn't test this. After it is eaten, it is said to sleep for 3 days and then awakes with an almighty roar. Its breath is said to be intoxicatingly sweet and lures other animals to follow it about the jungle. If this is indeed true, I'm not entirely sure why the perfumeries of the world have not tried to gather this scent. It sounds amazing. The only animal that is scared of the panther is the dragon, as we had mentioned in that poem at the beginning of the podcast. Moving on from big cats, we meet the antelope, described as having keen hearing and very difficult to approach or hunt. So right so far, there's an amusing picture that accompanies this entry, which shows a hunter creeping up on an antelope with an absolutely massive axe raised above his head ready to strike. If he actually swung the axe like that, it looked like he'd probably do himself some damage. According to the Bestiary, the only way to hunt an antelope is to wait for it to get its horns stuck in a tree, and they frequently do, apparently. I don't know that this is true of real life. It's an interesting technique, however, although I would say it's one that requires a lot of patience. The Ibex has an entertaining entry. It's described as a goat-like creature, which indeed it is, and it's said it has 2 horns, and these 2 horns are described as acting like a sort of airbag for the hapless animal when it falls off precipitous slopes. If you've ever seen them, this is indeed what appears to happen. The 2 horns of the Ibex have led it to being representative of learned men, and I quote, "supported by all the good they have derived from reading the witness of the Old Testament and the Gospels." So, learned men who then repeatedly fight and fall off mountains. That's what I take from that. The elephant, an altogether different creature and said to be as big as a mountain, is also noted to be scared of mice. This one has worked its way down through thousands of years because I remember being told in children's stories that elephants were afraid of mice. However, it is intelligent and has a fantastic memory, both of which is still noted today. During the 13th century, though, when these scribes were noting the many attributes of this powerful beast, they claimed it had no desire to mate. If it did, however, it would travel to the east, where there was a mandragora tree. The female would entice the male with fruit from the tree. Does that sound familiar? Well, you know what they say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. As we now know, this of course is not at all true, but a rather romantic idea of 2 elephants courting beneath a tree and sharing a fruit salad. I think that's enough of Lulu. Let's get back to the 13th century. In a rather dark entry for hyena, they are described as living on the graves of dead men and feeding from their bodies. Apparently they can imitate the human voice. They hunt in packs and lure men to them as their prey. Well, one of those is definitely correct. Apes also get a very bad rap in the Bestiary. The text starts by noting that they are cheerful when the moon is new and sad when it wanes, but it goes downhill from there. It considers them hateful and representative of the devil. All I can say is, sometimes we see in others what we dislike in ourselves. Lastly, the entries for camel and dromedary are in the main correct, probably because, like the elephant, this was an animal that was used by humans for transport across difficult terrain, and so was reasonably well known. Pictures of them would have been passed back and forth across the continents, and the scribes would have had access to reasonably reliable sources where these animals were concerned. There is a claim that they hate horses, though, and I did a quick Google, and I mean very, very quick. And once I'd ignored the diatribe that is AI, I found that it's much more likely to be the other way round, as camels give off a very pungent smell which horses don't like. Horses and camels often work together though, so I guess the camel to the horse is a little like that office colleague who brings in the egg mayo sandwich every lunchtime. There are pages and pages describing animals across the world within the bestiaries, and if you'd like to know more, I heartily encourage you to seek out a bestiary at your local library or in a museum. There are many of them. This episode contains just a few of the highlights of the creatures concerned with the earth and far-off climes, and as such is just a selection of the information that amused me most or piqued my interest when reading the MS Bodley 764. After exploring the medieval world of these animals, I am again given to ponder that these creatures, once drawn with such care, their description transcribed with meticulous attention to detail, even if some of those descriptions were a little suspect, we now unfortunately find that many of these creatures are not just endangered, but critically endangered. And in the case of big cats, in 2007, the Amur leopards were as few as 19 individuals in the wild. Many of these animals fall foul of there being too many humans and not enough resources. So I have again decided that perhaps by remembering these creatures of earth and speaking their names into the world, we can help to bring them back from the brink, so that they can appear in the bestiaries to come. And so, as I did for episode 2, after the story I will speak the names of these big cats, elephants, apes and ibex as the music plays us out, and I invite you to join me. I will include a list of names in the show notes for you if you wish to. All of this brings us to this episode's story, which is a very short fable from the very famous Aesop's. It's probably one of the shortest stories I've ever told on the podcast, but whilst it is short, it does speak volumes, and so here is the fable of the fox and the lion. Once upon a time, there was a little fox cub who was out for his first walk. As he scampered across the plain, skulking low and hiding behind the little tufts of grass, he spotted an enormous beast with a long swishing tail and a halo of curly wild hair. He ran away, scared, and went straight to his mother to ask her what it might be. "Well, that is the lion, little fox," said his mother. When he was out for his second walk, the fox encountered the lion again. This time the lion was fast asleep in the midday sun, and this time the little fox dared to sniff around him, pushing his nose against the big cat's enormous paws. The lion did not stir, and the fox trotted off home, very proud of himself. On his third encounter with the lion, the little fox walked right up to him, patted him on the head and said, "Hello, old fella!" And without so much as a how do you do, he ran on home, thinking to himself that there really was nothing much to the lion after all. The moral of this story? Well, the moral is that familiarity can breed contempt. Thanks for joining me around the hearth for this episode of Stories from Lore. For more folklore and stories, you can subscribe to my Substack newsletter. Just hop over to the Substack site and search for Ceridwen's Cauldron, or use the link in the show notes. You can upgrade to paid for just £5 a month to access extended episodes in the archives, extras, and for this season, an exclusive monthly podcast for subscribers called The Story Forecast. Signing up as a paid or free subscriber is much appreciated and helps to support the podcast and my work with folklore and story. As well as Substack, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The Bard Dawn. Reviews are also gratefully received. I hope to see you again soon, as I'd love to tell you another story. Until next time, toodle pip. Asiatic lion, Sumatran tiger, Bengal tiger, Malayan tiger, Amur tiger, Indo-Chinese tiger, South China tiger, Javan leopard, Amur leopard, Arabian leopard, Indo-Chinese leopard, Anatolian leopard, Asiatic cheetah, Northwest and Northeast African cheetah, African forest elephant, African savanna elephant, Asian elephant, black rhinos, Javan rhinos, Sumatran rhinos, Nubian Ibex, Walia Ibex, Pyrenean Ibex, Adax, Hirola, Adas duca, Damar gazelle, Sega, chimpanzee, mountain gorilla, gibbons of many kinds, lemurs, howler monkeys, spider monkeys, marmosets, capuchins, sarkies, tamarins, all of you, you are remembered.